everyone. My name is Sue Langelina, and I'm from the Business Career Development Office. And welcome to our third day, fourth session of 4 days, 4 ways for your career success. Today, I'm thrilled to have Carrie McDonald, Talent Acquisition Director for Finance, Actuarial, I always want to add science, Actuarial and Corporate Functions for MassMutual, and you know what, UConn's very own Ashley Browning, Talent Specialist for COCC. I'll let each of them provide a bit more information about themselves and how they came to be in their current positions, but I just want to make sure that everyone knows that this session is about how industries have different recruiting strategies and timelines. And hopefully you'll find this is a great session, so stay with me. I am getting a little bit of feedback. I don't know, can you folks hear me okay?
I can hear you, but I'm going to go on mute soon.
Okay, great. So Carrie and Ashley, it's great to see you both, and thanks for agreeing to join me today. As I indicated in the intro, I'd like you both to share your path to your position from the beginning, and don't hold back, because I've known you two for a very long time, so I don't know. It doesn't matter who wants to start first.
Ashley, you can go first.
Just gonna say the same thing. Fine, I'll do it. I'm Ashley Browning. Currently a talent specialist with COCC. In my role, I've actually been here for almost a year. In April, I started a new job in the pandemic, which is a little crazy. As I'm sure students are looking for opportunities or saying, well, what's going on, with the world, and is now a good time to be starting something new? Yes. So in my role, I recruit and onboard new hires for internship and full-time employees. Previous to that, I actually worked at the UConn Center for Career Development with all these folks, so near and dear to my heart. And I worked kind of on the opposite side of the table where I worked with Carrie to try to get her to recruit UConn students. And now we're kind of like competitors. So that's pretty cool. And before that, I worked at UConn at the Alumni Association. And before that, I had a stint in politics as a congressional aide. So I've had a couple different career moves. I am a English and journalism graduate from CLIS myself. And then I got my MBA through the School of Business. So UConn through and through, and yeah, that's me.
Wow, thanks. Go, Carrie.
So my background's a little longer, so Sue, I don't know how long you wanted me to go into detail. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree in business and marketing, and when I graduated, I will just tell you all that my specialty was in e-commerce, which was right around the .com boom. So now you don't really have to specialize that because that's the way we do everything now, right? So after business school, I decided that I wanted to pick up and move a little bit. I was involved in hospitality management for a number of years. Ran restaurants and bars in a couple different areas around the country. I came back to Massachusetts, where I'm from, and started my career. Had challenges starting my career here because I didn't want to do hospitality anymore. I didn't want to work until 2 o'clock in the morning, and trying to find a place where you could transition that skill set into corporate America. It was as if I had all this experience, but yet I had none in any of the areas I needed to go. So I started at Enterprise Rent-A-Car as a management trainee in their sales management training program, and worked my way up from the bottom. I started as a trainee, worked into a management role in about 7 months with the company, and then eventually transitioned into recruiting. And I've been in recruiting now since 2009. I predominantly recruited in the college space. Although I also had to hire different trades folks as well. So mechanics and diesel and all of that kind of stuff. So it was a little bit outside of college as well. I came to MassMutual 6 years ago in June. I just hit my 6 years.
Wow.
I know, crazy, right? I came over as a recruiter, and I was pretty much thrown into the fire of this business needs help. So I was able to build a network pretty quickly at the company because I was supporting every type of role from I hired helicopter mechanics, I hired pilots, I hired groundskeepers, I hired actuaries, I hired financial consultants, help desk for IT, customer service. So got to know a lot of different areas within the company. And then a little over a year or so ago, I moved into a director role. So now I oversee recruiting strategy for a third of the company. So that, as Sue mentioned, is mostly finance roles, compliance, law, facilities. So I still get those helicopter pilots, actuarial, and HR. So I oversee a lot of what you would think of as an overhead position. So you think of a balance sheet, anything that the business needs to keep running. That's what I oversee as far as recruiting strategy. So now I have a team that does the recruiting for me, and I meet with the managers to talk about strategy and what we need to do moving forward. And I also still head our campus recruiting operations as well.
Mm-hmm. Whoa. So that's quite the breadth of knowledge for both of you, right? Right. Sometimes that's a good thing. So you know what? Obviously, I've known you both for a number of years, and it goes way back to the point where, and we kind of talked about this when we were talking about joining together today, but we all used to serve on an organization called the Hartford Springfield Economic Partnership. And so I think even in those days, we were all a little bit green in the areas of what we were doing and how we engaged and how we networked. But I think maybe the bigger point that I'm trying to get at is that your network just continues to grow, right? Within your own personal life and obviously within your work life. So I'm going to get right to it. You know what, for the good of the group, how about you share a little bit what you believe the differences are within your organizations between a recruiting position and an HR position? I think oftentimes from my perspective, and Ashley, you probably know this, being on the other end of the spectrum, right, is that students oftentimes are not really sure if there's a difference and if there is a difference, what it is. So maybe within your own organizations, you could reflect a little bit and provide some information about what those differences are, if there is a difference. Carrie, you go first.
So you want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So from the big corporate side of things, our HR and recruiters are absolutely different. So we have an HR team I'm getting feedback too. Are you all getting feedback?
It's probably me. I'm going to mute unless I'm talking.
Okay. Sorry. So within our organization, we have HR business partners that are advisors to the business about their organizational design, about development plans. We also have a talent management group that comes up with development plans and works on succession planning and all of those different things. But our recruiters are really the people that are truly liaising between the candidate and the hiring manager in terms of what they need for a position and what they're looking for. So we are the go out and find that talent and sell them on why they want to come to MassMutual, as well as, after we talk to a candidate, it's then selling you as a candidate to the hiring manager. So for us, HR is a bigger organization and there's a lot of functions within that, but recruiting is specifically responsible for the candidate experience and the hiring manager experience, and we're kind of that bridge to bring the talent into the program or into the company.
Thanks. Ashley, how about your organization?
Yeah. So, and just, I know COCC isn't probably as familiar as MassMutual. So we're a financial technology company based in Southington. We have about 650 employees and we're growing. And we provide the software and IT support for like smaller banks and credit unions, community banks and credit unions. So People's United was on campus. They're one of our clients. So it's a little bit about us. So similar to MassMutual and to what Carrie shared, we kind of have divisions within HR as well. So I sit on the talent management team, and those are our recruiters. So we go out, we look for candidates, we try to create networks on LinkedIn. We go to the college career fairs and meet students for our internship program, and we're in the sales role. So we're really selling COCC and the employee experience to potential employees. And then we have a total rewards team that handles things like benefits, workers' comp, employee relations. So if someone's having trouble at work or needs some kind of coaching or something, that's a team that's a resource for them there. They handle payroll. And then we have a talent development team, and that team works with our employees to get them the education they need, training, professional development. So we also kind of split our roles into three. So when someone says HR, it's probably just recruiting that you're working with before you're an employee, and then you get to connect with everybody else.
Great. Interesting. So let's start in the very beginning from a student's perspective. So internships, do you both recruit for internships, and what is the timeline? So is it different for actuarial? Is it different for finance? Is it different for technology? Would it be different for sales, marketing? I know neither one of you essentially are marketing, but we oftentimes talk about marketing within sales. So maybe you could give some touch points for both of that.
Yeah, sure. So we absolutely hire interns. We hire in pockets of the company, not all areas. Timeline is really dictated by industry. So it's not really a company choice. Well, it is if you don't want to hire the best interns, but you have to go with what your industry does. So specifically in actuarial and finance, absolutely, like it's a big push in the first semester of the year. So in the fall semester, we as a company are usually about 95% done with intern recruiting by Christmas break. In some of the my past experience, my previous company where we were hiring customer service and sales, we started a little later. So we usually started around the holiday season and would go into the spring. But every year it seems to get earlier and earlier and earlier because then when we're talking to candidates, you already have a couple of different competing offers. We want to try to get ahead of those. So every year it gets earlier and earlier. So I think for the most part, timeline is really industry specific. But I would say, once you start getting settled into your classes in your fall semester, most of the time, most companies are looking at juniors and above. Some companies will look at sophomores as well. You should start thinking about what you might want to be looking for in an internship that first semester of your sophomore year so that you can see what's out there. You can understand the marketplace and going to career fairs, earlier definitely helps to kind of understand what that landscape might look like for your major, for your area. But for us specifically, we do start in the fall and we're usually done, right after winter break or so.
Nice. Ashley, I know that you indicated, right, that you've already, that you've hired and that you do have an internship program. What's the timeline like for you?
Yeah, so with a lot of smaller companies, which even 600 is considered kind of mid-size, our internship program is very much a program and a cohort that we bring in for the summer. So it's just a smaller probably program than something like MassMutual. So we actually start pretty late for the industry. We start looking for interns in February. So we just came to the internship fair, the career fairs. We're starting to do our college recruiting now. We take applications from now until probably the first or second week of March. And then we look for our candidates and we start our internship program June 1st. It's a 30-hour week program for 10 weeks. And we have everyone start on the same day, finish on the same day, because we do a lot of professional development and trainings and things for the interns together in a group. So we hire across, we do have marketing interns. We have one that actually started earlier than this internship cohort that we're hiring for. A lot of IT analysts, data type of roles, software developers, sales, business intelligence, and customer service too. So they're all very different roles, but they all start at around the same time.
Definitely for the internship program, all the same time, no matter what industry for you. Okay. And I think that that's an interesting thing for students to reflect on as well, right? Different companies, different company cultures have different timelines. I did put in the chat, not so much for us, but Emily, maybe you could take a peek at it if you're interested. There's a recruiting timeline by industry. This was created not by our office, but through Johns Hopkins. But I think it provides a very nice overview of the industry timeline just in general, that perhaps if you'd like to go ahead and take a look at it, you can use it as a reference. So when we're,
So it's not in the chat. Maybe hit return. It might be.
I can see it in the chat. Tricia and I put it in there, or maybe I'll check on it at the end of the presentation.
Okay.
I can see that I put my email in there too, and I spelled UConn wrong. So there you go. So as well as entry-level positions, let's talk a little bit about full-time positions. You know, in my brain, I always think that if someone moves up within your organization or transitions into another position, that position, full-time position, you would want to fill it right then. Is there a difference between how the timeline works for full-time positions and how you recruit for those positions? Either one of you.
I guess I'll just keep with the regulation. So I think it's mindful to call out that there's a couple of different types of full-time entry-level positions. So you have both development program positions, and then you also have direct hire positions. So in a program type of development program where you're looking for somebody, like we have a data science development program, we have an actuarial leadership development program. The recruiting cycle mirrors what the intern cycle is, except it's in your senior year. So it's before you graduate. For a direct hire role, which is probably the majority of the roles that you're gonna be looking for pertaining to the most students, it's really a just-in-time kind of hire. So it's not something, for us at least, with the majority of our positions, if I have a role that's posted or that's open right now, the manager might not be willing to wait until you graduate. So it's hard to interview more than like a couple months before you're gonna graduate, and then have that manager hold off, because as Stu mentioned, if we had somebody that moved out of that position and we now need to backfill, if we don't do it within like our average is around 45 to 50 days to fill an open position. If we don't do it in that time frame, there's business deliverables that will then suffer by not having that person there. So we try to fill things as quickly as we can. There's always exceptions to every rule though. So there's, you know, certain roles that maybe it's an add to staff. So it's an organization that's growing and adding to their current team because of things coming down the line. And then those usually have a longer ramp up period. But you know, full-time entry-level positions, we definitely hire a lot of different roles. It's just unfortunate that most companies, when you go onto the company website, they're not going to call it out as this is entry-level. Like you'll have to kind of look into, you know, if you're looking for finance, you'll have to look at finance positions, and then you'll have to look at those roles and see, hey, what are they requiring for someone to have in terms of a skill set for this position? I don't know of too many companies that completely will, you know, parse out those entry-level jobs. So you have to kind of do a little bit of digging. And, you know, the first place to start is always at your career services, because those companies that are specifically looking for new grads and have either those development programs or are mindful that they have a high, you know, hiring push that's going to be in May or June, they're going to go after new grads because they know there's a good pool of people coming out of school. So if you're looking for those full-time positions, that's a good place to start too, in terms of insights. So looking on Handshake and seeing what's available. And then, you know, once you see those roles, you can always research the company a little bit more and see what else is out there that they're looking for at that current point in time.
Great information. Go, Ashley.
So similarly, if we have a replacement role, we want to fill it as soon as possible. So we try not to wait for that. We have actually had a couple cases this year where we had interns that had interned with us the previous summer. We let them stay on for the fall and the spring if they do a good job. So we've had interns that converted to full-time, and so instead of, you know, being an intern now, they're just working part-time until they graduate. So we've been able to be flexible with that. Like Carrie mentioned, add to staff. So if it's a new person to a team, we can kind of take a little bit of a slower pace with that, but usually try to get somebody in the door as soon as possible. I know too that you know, if students apply for positions, especially right now when everyone's looking for full-time jobs, and they might be looking at our internship program, but also, you know, what do you have for full-time? We don't put if it's entry level. Sometimes it's like a more senior level role, but we don't even put the title in there because we're trying to make sure that we're being as open as possible and getting the right candidate. So students who apply and might not be qualified, I'll still talk to them because I know that down the road I'm going to be hiring somebody who's entry level. So it's good to make the connection now. So definitely look and make sure you're qualified for things. But if you have questions and there's, you know, a contact person or something, or you know, you see them at the company at a college fair and you saw a position you're interested in, but you don't think you're ready for it yet, still make that connection, find the recruiter on LinkedIn, because it helps us with our job too. So we're trying to find good people. So if you're, you know, a student that would be a great fit with our company, just because now is not the right time doesn't mean it won't be later. So definitely, you know, be encouraged to connect.
Great information. And, you know, that was actually something that had come up in one of our previous sessions as well, is about making that connection, right, with the recruiter and staying connected, because there might not be a position currently that would be appropriate, but certainly in the future. So keep that connection open and live. So my next question is huge. It has lots of moving parts. So I'm just going to parcel it out piece by piece and hope that we can come to some sort of agreement about where we are in the answers here. So here's a silly little question, but who creates the actual job posting, and what is the process within your respective organizations? So, you know, I'm kind of, again, dealing with that timeline, right? Where does it start? How does it end? So, yeah. Who creates it?
So it's a partnership. So we're a very extra mutual company. We do everything together. So our job descriptions, the manager comes up with, hey, this is what I think I need in terms of skill set and what the role is going to be. Our total rewards team levels it out, make sure that the expectations for the person coming in are at the right compensation range for the requirements that we're looking for. Every company has like a job family or a job framework in terms of the levels of where that role is going to sit. And then for our process, after those two pieces have kind of gone through the process, the job description is put into our applicant tracking system for approval. So then, you know, certain levels of approval for us to hire for that role have to happen within the business. And then once that goes to the approval process, that job description, job posting will come to myself and my peers to assign a recruiter. So it can happen literally in 24 hours. It can happen in 4 hours. It can happen in 3 weeks, depending on how quickly people do their step in the process. So the timing really is dependent on all the parties and how quickly we need to hire someone.
Okay, fair enough. Ashley?
Much the same thing. So partnership with the manager, making sure we have what they are looking for in the job description, and then kind of moving it forward the same way where it goes through approval processes and on our applicant tracking system as well.
So I'm going to take the opportunity, because you both mentioned applicant tracking systems. I'm going to kind of go further down in my my Q&A period here. And you know what, I posed the question that said that I wanted to talk a little bit about applicant tracking systems and what works and what doesn't. And you know what, for us in the School of Business, we teach a super standard Western style resume. And oftentimes what I hear from students regarding an applicant tracking system is how do they tell their personal story? Because they're really just picking out keywords through an applicant tracking system, and they feel as though perhaps it's not telling their personal story that they want to tell within the resume. Can you give us a little bit of guidance there, and maybe what works and what doesn't work, and suggestions?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful to call out what an applicant tracking system is. So it's exactly it tracks applicants. Doesn't do, not all applicant tracking systems do any kind of keyword searches or looks through, like there's still a person that's involved is what I'm trying to get at without
Okay.
being able to say it. So there's definitely a person that's involved. Some of us have different automation that's involved on top of that. So like we have a tool called Modern Hire where if somebody applies, you automatically get a text 30 seconds after you apply, which asks you to answer, 2 to 5 different screening questions in terms of making sure you minimally qualify. And then if you do, you automatically get 3 questions that you get to present a video answer to, telling your story. So that's all before a person even sees it. So our automation that we've built into our system allows people to be able to tell their story. Without using that extra platform, in terms of the resume, I'm a big fan of summaries, and I know that doesn't get taught anymore, but I'm a big fan of like a paragraph at the top of your resume about what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're a computer science major, that's great, but what do you want to do with that? So I think being able to have a few lines at the top of that summary in terms of what direction you're interested in. And it's okay to have more than one resume because you want to make sure you're not applying to a company that your story doesn't make sense for. So you want to make sure that you have a couple different copies of your resume that tell that story authentically in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. And, one-page resume is hard for some students with how involved you are on campus and different things that you are involved in. So I think it's, to me, that summary or that profile statement at the top of your resume gives you the ability to add that in. You also will usually have the ability to upload a cover letter into the applicant tracking system as well, but I will be very honest that it doesn't always get read. So having that quick summary statement at the top of that is a way to make sure that story is being heard, and it should be a quick pitch. It shouldn't be a 3-page paragraph, 3-page, sentiment about what you're trying to accomplish. But that's kind of how I would be able to, or would suggest showcasing that story on top of just the resume itself. But if we didn't have ATSs, people would never hear back from anything because, when we get hundreds of applicants for a job, that's the only way we can keep track of who's on first and who's going where, who did we speak to, who did we not. So the applicant tracking system itself helps. Some companies do use keyword searches to help build in automation, but I think that's fewer, than what companies don't. So Ashley, curious to hear your take on it.
Me too, Ashley. Definitely coming from the other side, right? Because you were on the side as well as teaching that Western style resume, and it's very stilted sometimes about the information that we end up including on a resume. So
yeah, and I think I had the same perception too before now working in an ATS, that it really was computerized, and like Carrie said, it's not. It's basically a CRM. It's like an Excel spreadsheet for us. There's really not too much it does. It's a person. So myself or my teammates look through every single application that comes in for our job. I don't read cover letters. I'm a skimmer. So I really look for format and file because that tells me that you're attentive to detail, that you've thought about this, that you put effort and time into applying. I look for what your experience has been, basically making sure you don't have errors because that's something that really quickly can give me bad vibes. But we get to learn about your story through the next step of phone screen. So if you're qualified for the job, that's really all you need to make sure you have on your resume. Show me how you're qualified. Show me how the tech stack or the skills or whatever I'm looking for in the job description are part of your portfolio. So, you can also add a LinkedIn page. You can, link to your LinkedIn page. I know some people with more technical roles put in like a GitHub or something, or your own website. If you're into marketing, great, include that as a supplement. But I'll hear your story when we talk. So all of our candidates get phone screened who are a good fit for the role or who are minimally qualified. So Yeah, the ATS is pretty much just our way of being able to get all the information over to us. So we'll look at you, and then we can mark if we're going to interview you or screen you. We can send your resume to the manager. We send our declines in there. So it's really just a way to help us organize the whole process. But the resume really, it needs to be good. And it's funny because coming from a college background where, you know, I'm working with students on updating their resume and talking to employers about it, I can't tell you how many terrible resumes I see from like mid to late people who should have been doing this their whole life. And it really makes a difference. And I've talked to some great people and shared their resume with the hiring manager, and the hiring manager was like, I don't like this resume. I'm like, well, we passed the resume because, and this is why, but like, if you're going to really sell yourself as your first impression with a recruiter, like have a strong resume. Take the advice from the Career Center, take your resume book home. And a lot of people too try to like stand out with their resume, maybe do some kind of like logo or design like that. That's nice. And if you're going for something that's more design focused or something like that, that's important. But for something in finance or business, just really having a strong resume that points out your skills and your qualifications is where to go.
Nice. You know what? And we did have someone mention this week to, you know, go ahead and put your photo out there, which is interesting because I think it goes to the point of knowing where you're applying, right? And knowing whether or not you might be a good cultural fit by investigating and looking at your website, the company website. So I think, you know, Carrie, when you said a summary, I can tell you that oftentimes we tell students not necessary for a summary, or an objective is not necessary because they're using an applicant tracking system and they know that you're applying to job number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, I think I've used those words myself. So I think it's interesting to hear the perspective, different recruiters, different industries, and what they're actually looking for.
Well, I think where the summary helps is that if I have 10 different intern roles that are doing completely different things and someone applies to all 10, where do I start with them? What are they really interested in? So yes, the applicant tracking system does tag what job you're applying to, but I want to know more than that, because while Ashley's able to screen every person that applies that minimally qualifies, we're not with the numbers that we have coming through. That's why we actually added another layer of this technology on top to have people actually do the video interviews and things like that, because it really shows you how interested they are in the job. If they don't do it, then they don't get considered. So there's different stages things that we've had to kind of put into place to make it realistic. So we might not be able to interview everybody that minimally qualifies. And if somebody's summary further, you know, shows why they're interested in that particular role, then I'm more likely to pick up the phone and call them, or email. I'm not going to pick up the phone because nobody answers the phone when we call. I will email them or text them and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this application. Do you have time to chat? Because nobody answers the phone anymore. But yeah, the summary does help a little bit. Absolutely. And I've gone through that first line screen where I've looked at the resume, and because of my background with working with colleges and career centers and students, I've phone screened the person, and then I said, okay, I will move you forward if you go talk to your career services and have someone look at this resume and get me a better copy of your resume, then I'll move you forward to the hiring manager. Because oftentimes you only have that chance to get a first impression, and that manager looking at that bad resume is going to have an unconscious bias in their head the entire time they're talking to you. So I try to put them in a better situation before even moving them forward. But I'm the exception to the rule. I know that it's not something that a lot of other people would do. So just to be mindful of that.
Wow, great information.
Wait, just to follow up on the phone thing. So nobody talks on the phone. And I have a work phone through my computer, but the audio is terrible. So I use my cell phone for everything. And there have been many times where a candidate does not pick up their phone because they think I'm calling about their extended auto warranty. Like, I'm not a spam.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not a spam thing, too, where it's like the Google subscriber. And I'm like, we have a scheduled call. So just when you're looking for jobs, you're thinking about it. I know no one wants to take those calls, but like if you're expecting someone to reach out or it's an unknown number, especially if they leave a voicemail, call them back or ask the recruiter like what number they're going to be calling you on. Just you don't want to miss those opportunities because it's still really important to try. You're going to talk to them eventually. So if they're not going to be screening you, they're going to be someone's going to call you to set up an interview, or maybe email you, or maybe you're going to have to call and have questions. So pick up your phone, please.
Great information. Great information. So this is, again, on that very beginning time frame there when I was talking about my big list of questions. So silly, but we hear this question a lot from students. Do you start reviewing applicants before the deadline, before the end of the posting?
We don't use deadlines. So I always operate with especially with our intern roles, on a first come, first served basis. So we do rolling applications. So we know what good looks like. So we're not going to wait until we see a certain number of people or anything like that before we make a decision. So we try to move quickly because, again, the competition's moving quickly, and we need to get ahead of that as well to make sure that we're bringing in the best talent for our organization that's out there. So we don't actually use deadlines for the majority of our programs. We have two technical programs that do use it for full-time hiring. So they actually will also look at applications on a rolling basis and then not make decisions until the deadline has passed. But they have like tech, they have to submit a portfolio and all of those different pieces past the application. So a lot of people don't actually submit that until later. So that's why the deadline's important in that kind of scenario.
Nice. Ashley, how about you? Do you use deadlines? Do you review the applicants? Okay.
We review for serve our internship. There's a deadline on Handshake because I just want the posting to come down at a certain point. And because the interns start around the same time, we need about 2 weeks for them to get through our system to be able to start at that time. So there's really no deadline. It's first come, first serve, but on a schedule, I guess.
So, and this is kind of silly, but it may be redundant to ask, but are applicants notified that they are out? In other words, that they're out of the pool right away, or does it happen at the end of the process?
We have a firm focus on candidate experience. So I have with my team that they're expected to reach out to any candidate one way or another within 2 weeks after they apply. That's something that I monitor for my areas, but our applicant tracking system as well, we disposition people as they go. So if they're out, that means you're getting dispositioned out of the rec. So yes, we do it as you go. I am now learning after building a brand new team that a lot of other companies don't do that, and they wait until that hire is made and then they mass, populate everyone. Sorry, we filled this position. But we do it as we're going through the process. So I wouldn't want someone to lose out on another opportunity because they're waiting to hear back from us. And we also encourage the candidates as well as we're going through the process. Hey, let me know what your timeline is. My timeline is X. If your timeline doesn't match that, please let me know so that I can make sure I get a decision before you have to give a decision to another company or something along those lines. But we do disposition as we go.
That's very respectful.
Like I said, we're extra mutual.
No, I like it. Well, for me, just speaking recently with a student, was talking about a program that they had applied to, and it was months ago, and they know that the position is still open, and so we kind of talked about that many companies do not, until the position is completely filled, do they notify all the candidates.
Yeah.
So, Ashley, what about you?
Yeah, we tell someone right away. So if you apply in the system and you're not eligible, we decline you through the system. If we talk to you, we usually send an email or I'll call somebody and let them know that we're not moving forward. We do candidate experience surveys after every hire. So if we're hired, we'll get surveys. So it's really important to us also to have a positive experience there. So,
nice.
And we don't take our down until someone's passed background check and has a start date as well. So a lot of times, that's a good point too. Like people will apply to something and the position's full, really, but I'll still look at your application, and if it's not a fit for you right now, because we have somebody, maybe there's a fit down the road. So
nice. Okay. So going along the same questions as far as the application is concerned, how many rounds of interviews do you generally have? And I get it, probably different positions maybe have different numbers of interviews, but generally speaking, within your own organizations, what's the number of interviews from start to finish?
So we strongly recommend and encourage with our managers that we have no more than 4 rounds of interviews with no more than 4 interviews in a round. So we call it a rule of 4. Your first interview is going to be with a recruiter. It's going to be a deep dive into your skills. It's going to have competency-based behavioral interview questions. So that's your round 1 first interview. Then usually the second round would be one-on-one with the hiring manager. So making sure that the hiring manager feels that you have the skills necessary or have the ability or potential demonstrated to do the work that's needed in the role. And then for an intern position, it's usually, it would usually be 2 people at that hiring manager stage. So we try to have a diverse slate of interview panelists as well. So making sure that we have a good representation of our workforce included on that panel. For a full-time position, you might have another round. So that third round where you might meet with a couple other people as well. We usually convert our intern talent into full-time positions, but the interview process is a little lighter for an internship versus a full-time permanent position. But within our entry-level roles, it's usually not more than 2 rounds. For a position like in our call centers, there's an assessment involved as well. So you might have a interview with a recruiter and then have to go through an assessment and then an interview with the hiring manager. So it's still around that 3 rounds, but it just looks a little bit different.
Okay.
We try not to exhaust our candidates and get, have them go through interview fatigue is what we kind of call it. And also the longer the rounds, the longer the people you're meeting with, the more challenging the calendars are and the whole timeline just gets pushed out. So
Sure. And Ashley, how about for your organization, number of interviews?
So for internships, ours is lighter too. So for our interns, actually, they only meet with HR, and we do what we call a culture-based interview, which similar to Carrie's, it's based on, it's behavioral. It's based on making sure that person's aligning well with our culture. And then we also do an assessment for every candidate, so intern and full-time. It's a workplace preference assessment, and it kind of scares people because they think it's a quiz, but it really helps us to understand what a candidate's preferred work style is, whether they're more of an independent thinker or if they're more collaborative, if they like a steady work environment or if they like a really fast-paced environment. And it's something that we talk to them about and go through during the interview, and we send them a copy too. So this is for all of our interns. They get that. If you take it in MBTI or like a DISC assessment, it's similar to that. So our interns meet with HR, and then we do kind of a pick, and we place them with the managers we think would be the best fit. We work really closely with our managers for that. For somebody coming in for an entry-level position, they'll have a culture fit interview with HR after a phone screen with us. It's 15, 20 minutes just to learn more about their background. They'll do a culture fit, which is about a half an hour. We'll do the assessment and go over that with them. And then they'll meet with usually the manager and maybe a team lead for an hour. If they go to the second round interview, that's usually with a bigger team or an AVP or someone higher up in that department. So it's usually 2 interviews. Sometimes it's 3 for a higher level position, but usually 2.
Great information. So I'm just, I know that in being respectful of time, we've already been chatting for 45 minutes now. I just want to make sure, check in, see if anybody has any questions. Obviously, Ashley and Carrie, if there's anything that you wanted to turn around and share that perhaps we didn't touch upon that you think is important knowledge for not only our student population, but for us as career consultants, if there's information that's new and exciting to the world of recruiting that you think would be important for us, please share. My teammates too, if anybody has anything that they'd like to add, questions at this particular point in time. If not, I just want to make sure Kathy, can you now see the timeline?
Yep.
I'm going to it's obviously, I have it up on my screen, but I do think that this timeline is very important for all of us to review. It gives consulting, finance, healthcare, technology, nonprofit, and government positions, interestingly enough, real estate, consumer goods, all of the touch points within the School of Business, and for students that are listening now and hopefully in the future, I think even though it's a recorded session, this would still be a live link and that you would be able to obtain this information. It's actually, as I indicated, Johns Hopkins is through NACE actually that they developed this. So there's a lot of information out there about the timeline, different industries, and what the recruiting process actually looks like. If no one has timeline, can you send it at some point? I can, it's, Judy, it's within the chat, and it should be that you can go ahead and click it, and I can send it to the team as well. So if anyone has anything to add at this particular time, feel free.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you all been having conversations with students about any type of hesitancy in applying to jobs that are remote only due to the pandemic, or students that are hesitant to apply to jobs because they don't know the company's stance on a safe return to work or anything along those lines?
Well, I can start off. I'm sure that my team has more information to share as well. I definitely have met with students that want to know what the overall status is, whether or not the position, it might not be posted as remote only. And so it leaves them questioning whether or not the position is in person or remote. And many of them at this particular point in time have not wanted to A, apply if it was in person, and B, have not wanted to apply if it is remote only. So, I mean, there's both sides of the spectrum. Yeah. I think it is always, you know, so I always tell the students that if there's a contact, you know, certainly feel free to go ahead and make that connection and see if anyone can provide information one way or the other, but that they have to be mindful that really for most of us, everything is pretty fluid moving forward. And so depending upon what's important to them and what their level of, are you finding lower applicants?
We're getting kind of a mix. So in certain parts of the country, obviously, there's been a different approach to COVID and following CDC guidelines and whatnot. So I think it depends on where that position is and where the person lives. We've seen an increase in managers being open to remote work that they weren't in the past. We've seen some of our competitors move to a remote only model. And then now we have to, you know, compete against that if it's important for people across the country. If we're talking about New England talent, is not as much as an issue because they don't have to necessarily move because they're close to one of our locations. I think with students specifically, when we let them know that, hey, our internship is remote, it was a mixed bag because some schools are in person and some kids are living in dorms and going to school remotely from their dorm, or are on campus and going to class. You know, there's such a wide mix that's out there. So we definitely had some students that were upset that our internship was remote. But then as we branch out farther across the country, more are excited about being able to be home with family, have an expectation of what's coming in terms of where they're going to be over the summer instead of some of the up in the air in terms of reopenings and things like that. So we've kind of seen a little bit on both sides as well.
And Ashley, you're completely remote, am I correct?
Yeah, we're remote until it's safe to come back. And so it's been really fluid and open. We're not sure when that's going to be. So it's a conversation that we're having with everyone we talk to let them know that the position's starting remote, but out of the 600 or so employees, only 5% were remote pre-pandemic. We are like an in-person culture. We have facilities and a gym and a lunchroom and a lot of collaboration space, and our culture really relied on that collaboration. And so having to make that come across in a remote environment, especially for new hires that we want to make sure, and interns, that we want to make sure they feel that kind of sense of collaboration, has been tough. but we're making it work. So it's something definitely, like, if you have questions about it as a candidate, ask when the return to work is going to be, what are the parameters around it, that's okay. Kind of off topic, but another thing that's okay to ask, which I never thought it was before, but like talking about salary is not so taboo, at least for us. For internships and things like that, there's pretty much a standard rate for interns. There's not much wiggle with that. But I talk to every candidate about salary before moving them into an interview, because I want to make sure that this is going to align with what they're looking for. So it's okay. It shouldn't be the first question you ask, and if the recruiter doesn't bring it up, you can definitely bring it up next time. But don't be afraid to get around those things, because they're just part of the conversation. It was something I was totally baffled by when I was job hunting. They were asking me what I wanted to make, and I was like, I'm not supposed to tell you. But don't keep secrets. So yeah, so just, do your research, go on Glassdoor, check out companies, see what the industry trends are for salary. Again, for internship programs, there's usually a very standard, but for level full-time, there could be some opportunity for that, to talk about that.
Nice. Judy.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Ashley. How you doing? Hi. I have a question. For those employees that are being placed into jobs, either internships or full-time remotely, what do you provide regarding their office setup? Is it a set amount of money, or do you provide a laptop and a chair, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the person, but the standard package that an employee would receive is a laptop, a dock station that charges, a second monitor. Like I have 2 monitors. I can't really work without 2 anymore. I'm spoiled. But there's a lot of different things that our package includes. A headset, depending on the role, could be a company cell phone. I also have voice over IP through an app on my computer as well, so that I can access my landline from my desk, which is turning into the rotary phone now. So I think it depends on the company, but if you're doing work for a company that's making a profit off of the work that you're doing, they should be providing you with what you need to do that job. If you need a certain ergonomic chair, different things like that, we have an accommodation process that someone would have to go through, but an office chair isn't an expectation of what you would get as part of the normal package, but depending on the person for what the need might be, we would provide it. We also, as a financial services company, don't encourage printing off-site, so we don't supply printers, nor do you have a need to print anything really that you work on for us anyway, but your normal laptop and all of the accessories are included.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Same with you, Ashley?
We provide, depending on the role, we provide a stipend for their technology.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
That's good. Then they don't have to pick, like you get a choice of like 3 devices with us. So with a stipend, you get to go buy your own with what you're comfortable. But it shouldn't be like most companies, it shouldn't be, okay, we got you a new job. Now you have to figure out how to do that job with technology. So I would encourage students to ask, but I would assume that most establishments would be providing either a stipend or a product.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So I know that, Carrie, you need to hop off because you have another meeting right at 4. I don't want to close this up. I think that these conversations are always helpful. And personally, I'm just going to say it was great for me, to hear, Ashley, your side from being obviously on the career side and now on the recruiting side. And Carrie, it was super lovely to catch up with you again in a different role and a different time. So I just want to remind folks, yes, Kathy?
I just wondered if Ashley or Carrie would mind sharing their contact information for the student Emily who's on, if she has questions to follow up with you.
Yes, and Emily, are you the same Emily that worked for MassMutual? I don't know if she has her mic on, but
so I'm not really sure.
She's on mute.
We had an Emily camera that was an intern for us, so that's why I've been staring at her name this whole time. So absolutely. Feel free to give my name and is attached on pretty much everything with UConn. So absolutely.
So Carrie, Emily says that it's not her.
Oh, okay. Okay, well then you have someone with the same name that worked at Mass Mutual.
Carrie, are you able to go ahead and plunk your email into the chat box?
Sure.
Is that something? Okay, great. So I just want to remind folks that are tuning in later or for tomorrow that it will be our last day of 4 days, 4 ways. And we start right at noon with a review of the offer. Searching for purpose in your career is at 1. At 2, we have the virtual classroom, going from the virtual classroom to virtual work, what you need to know. And at 3 o'clock, we have what's next, graduating, alumni, and beyond. So thanks again to Carrie and Ashley for joining. My team, if you wouldn't mind staying on for just one hot minute as we end our recording. But everyone stay well, stay healthy, and thanks for your time and energy.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Ashley and Carrie. Bye, Emily.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Bye.